This week's focus is risotto. This is another recipe that is going to show you how to not make rice boring. It is definitely one that proves to you that it can be fun and unique and that you can add in a lot of creative twists as soon as you know the methodology. Rice pilaf and risotto have many differences, but there are some similarities as well. As you watch this video, one thing that I want you to constantly be thinking about is what is similar and what is different than rice pilaf, because I'm going to ask you at the end.
Today you'll need 4 cups of chicken broth, 2 tablespoons of unsalted butter divided because you'll need them at 2 different times. You'll need a half of a large shallot or about a quarter of an onion very finely chopped like a brunoise, kosher salt to taste, a cup of arborio rice, which I'll talk more about in just a second, and up to a cup of finely grated Parmesan. You will need a large Dutch oven or a large sauté pan and a medium saucepan with a ladle or spoon. Now let's talk about arborio rice. This type of rice has a high starch content, and that gives risotto its creaminess. So yes, using this type of rice does matter for the end product. It's different because of its size. You'll notice that they are a little bit shorter and plumper than long grain rice. That's very important. We have now our chicken broth going into a saucepan near the pan that will hold our risotto, so it's easy to access. I want to make sure that chicken broth reaches round about the same temperature as what will be in the other pan. 1 tablespoon of butter goes in, and I add in the onion in this case. Shallots and onion are in the same family, so that is why we can use them relatively interchangeably, and that's why you can use whatever you have on hand. This step is called sweating the onion. What we are doing is making sure that it softens, and to help with that, we're going to add in our sprinkle of kosher salt as well. So we just want our onion to slightly cook, become soft, and become a little bit more translucent than it is right now. This step takes approximately 4 minutes for the onion to fully soften, so be patient. Once your shallot or onion is fully softened, it's time to add the rice. At this stage, what we are going to do is stir the rice into the butter, let it fully absorb that butter and get coated in it, and then we are toasting it. Now, it's not really about it turning brown. In fact, that's what we would like to avoid here, but it's more about letting the aroma and the flavor develop. That's why we do this step. So what we're looking for is for the tips of the rice to appear more translucent. The middle of the grain will still look dark white, but that will tell us that the toasting is complete here. This takes about 2 minutes. When the tips of the rice are translucent, I know that it is time to add in my chicken broth, about a half of a cup at a time. So this for me is about 1 spoonful here. You're going to see it kind of spatter and evaporate away relatively quickly because what we're doing there is deglazing the pan. Occasionally you're going to see Italian or French recipes deglaze this pan with about a half of a cup of wine, but we're skipping that step and just using a little bit of the chicken broth. So as soon as that gets evaporated away, you're going to make sure your heat is about medium-low. It shouldn't do that anymore. And now we'll add in another spoonful of our chicken broth. Our goal is that the rice slowly lets off its starch, and that's what brings this really creamy texture to risotto. So it's all about relatively slowly incorporating that chicken broth just until those rice granules begin to let off their starch. So whenever you pull that wooden spoon back and it leaves a dry pathway through the large saucepan, that's when you know that it's time to add more chicken broth. I'm constantly stirring. Notice as well that I'm trying to make sure that all of the rice grains stay in the pan. I don't want them to be on the sides of the pan or else they won't cook. Slowly, slowly, here it goes. The starch is being let off, and pulling back that spoon revealed that there was still moisture kind of seeping back in that path, and so not ready to add the chicken broth yet. So you can probably see now that risotto takes patience. We are going to repeat these steps, adding the liquid in about a half of a cup at a time, only when there's that dry path revealed by the swipe of a wooden spoon at the bottom of the pan. What we're doing is making sure that we are only adding the amount of chicken broth that we truly need in order to cook this rice. This is about at the halfway mark, so I've added about half of my chicken broth, and it's about half of our timing. At this point, this is when I'm going to start to taste. So after about 10 minutes of this cooking time, that's when I'm tasting. I want to see if we are at al dente. Yes, al dente is normally one of those words that we use only for pasta, but you often hear it with risotto because what we're talking about is wanting just a little bit of texture still to the rice grains rather than them just mushing. You don't want a mushy risotto. You do want a smooth, creamy risotto, but not a mushy one. And so we only want to add enough chicken broth to make it reach that stage and not more than that. After tasting, I have a perfect texture. I have perfect al dente. So I'm going to stop there and not add any more chicken broth. This is when we add in extra butter, a tablespoon or two. And then you could add in anywhere from a half to a cup of Parmesan. Obviously, the more that you add, the more cheesy it will be. This one is a very thick and cheesy risotto. They don't all have to be that way, so you get to choose. This is a good time to add in maybe a little spritz of lemon juice if it's feeling very rich to you. A little bit of acidity helps to cut that slightly. I decided it needed just a little bit more chicken broth that I had already had extra warmed up in that saucepan. It got a little gluey when I added the Parmesan. I was maybe a little heavy-handed there. Wouldn't be the first time. But by tasting it, that's how you know these things. So you can add in extra butter. You could add in a little extra cheese if you felt like it needed it. A little acidity. That's your decision based on tasting. We're also aiming to have a very particular texture of this risotto as well, and that's why I added a little bit more of that chicken broth earlier, because it should have this kind of wave-like quality that if I make a space in it with the spoon, that it should just kind of spill back over and fill that space. And with that, it is time to plate this creamy Parmesan risotto. So beautiful. We would normally probably serve this as a side dish. I don't think I would necessarily eat it on its own, but just for plating purposes today, I'm adding a little bit more color there. Hopefully the color comes also through whatever you serve it with. And that is how you make risotto, everyone. So try it out and practice adding in some different ingredients to make it unique.